From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Open Line.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm News Channel 5's Alexandra Koehn in for Carrie Sharp tonight. We are discussing Nashville's infamous property tax hike. If you live in Nashville and Davidson County, you probably already know that it was more than 30% this year. Well, tonight I'm joined by Steve Glover. He's a Metro Council member who plans to introduce a resolution tomorrow to possibly change that. He's been against the property tax hike. Steve, do you want to introduce just this resolution and just your opinions on it so far, and what do you think will happen in the next year in Nashville?
Well, I think if we get our act together, I think our economy will start coming back in full force. I think that the city will not cut the taxes. So if they're not, my resolution will say we need to do public safety and a couple other things to take care of folks here in town. I think it's regrettable that we're not going to lower the tax rate, because candidly, I believe we've got plenty of room to. There's others that will say, no, absolutely not. But as of right now, we're sitting on about a $65 million surplus for next year, and we still have 4 months to go in this fiscal year as far as the numbers I'm looking at.
Have you heard from anyone who has maybe moved out of Nashville because of the property taxes, or maybe someone who was looking at a home between Williamson or Sumner County and Nashville and picked a different place to live? What have you observed since this hike went into place?
Well, I've seen a lot of things, okay? So yes, I've seen people who have left Nashville. I've seen people who unfortunately have been forced out of Nashville, and they're trying to figure out how they actually make it. Because they've been squeezed out of here. I've seen people over the last year because we had shut down so hard that actually had to leave Nashville and literally move to other states in order to, get a job and pay for their family. So there's not much I haven't seen over the last 12 months, unfortunately. And it's not been a good thing. It's been a sad thing that our city has been so... we've been so blessed, but yet we have just literally abused what's happened over the last 14 months or so.
I know the comptroller initially said, the city will be devastated if this property tax hike doesn't happen. We won't be able to pay firefighters and police officers, and response times will go down. I know that was the big argument from the other side of this. What are you hearing now, and what do you expect once you file this resolution?
Well, I'll expect what I always expect. Look, I'm conservative, and they don't like me downtown. They don't like me downtown because I'll speak the truth. I will tell you what's really going on. I'll tell you what the numbers really look like. I'll tell you what I believe. And I got to tell you, Alexandra, I have rarely ever missed a revenue projection that I said we were going to do. And we can go all the way back to when I was on the school board and chair of budget and finance there. I mean, I'm going back almost 20 years ago. So when I look at the numbers, that's what I do every day in my daily life, is I project out what revenues would look like. I will look at what I think inflation's going to do. There's a lot of that that's scaring me to death right now. But we've made so many mistakes in Nashville. And unfortunately, what we've done is we've put it squarely on the backs of the taxpayers of Nashville. And candidly, it's unfair because the government felt no pain in the last year, except for the current employees who didn't get a cost of living adjustment, who didn't get anything, period. Did we lay anybody off? No. Did we furlough? No. But, the challenge is, our police, our fire, our first responders, our employees, it just was handled very poorly, in my opinion.
I believe this was the first property tax hike since 2012. So now, bring me up to speed with now. Do you think there will be another hike in the future? And talk a little bit about the group who I know they wanted to send it to voters. They wanted voters to be able to pick if there'd be a property tax hike or not. Whatever happened with that?
Well, I think it's happening right now. And, they're meeting with the election commission to try and get it on the ballot. I think it's the right thing to do. There was enough signatures for it. So I think that should be on the ballot. I think people should be allowed to vote for that. Now, amazingly, what's happening right now, somebody's out there asking people, do they want to remove their name off of that petition, et cetera. Now, I think that's pretty dirty, but apparently it's happening because I'm getting emails, I'm getting phone calls every day on that. So apparently it is happening. But let's go back to, the property tax increase. I don't know that any of us would have disagreed that there needed to be a little bit of a tax increase. But we didn't cut anything in government. We cut absolutely nothing. And what we did was we literally threw every bit of the burden on the taxpayers' backs. And so if you're in the USD, you got a 34% property tax increase. If you're in the GSD, General Service District, Hermitage, Bellevue, Goodlettsville, various places like that, you got a 37% property tax increase. During a pandemic, when we talked about that it's just the wrong thing to do, they went ahead and did it anyway. And they didn't want to hear a word that anybody had to say about it. But we have created a hardship on our people here in Nashville that really should be unforgivable. And so I'm trying to say, if we're not going to lower our tax rate, and the resolution I'm filing says we need to hire more police, more fire, and we need to hire enough folks in the business community as far as the building and contractor division to be able to start streamlining things there. Now, I'm working with the mayor's office on that piece of it. But police and fire, that's something I've preached about for years and years and years now. And it's time. It's time. If we're not going to cut that tax rate, it's time that we start dealing with the 30.9% homicide rate increase we've seen over the last year. It's time that we start actually dealing with the almost 17%, or actually greater than 17% aggravated assault rate that we're seeing in Nashville. And it's time that we start dealing with the stolen vehicles of over 12%. So it's time we start doing that. And if you look at the last 20 years, we have about one more fire station today than we had 20 years ago. So we are woefully understaffed in our police, our fire, and multiple other places as far as our first responders. And when I say police and fire, I'm talking about EMTs, I'm talking about all of that stuff. I'm also talking about, the 911 operators. They have a very challenging time trying to get people working for there. It's a hard job.
We do have a caller for you, so I'm going to jump right in here. And
Okay.
I believe their name is it Chavez? Correct me if I'm wrong, but what is your question for Steve tonight?
It is Chavez. My question for Steve is, why are we focusing on investing in public safety that shoots Black folks and our mental health cases in Nashville? Why aren't we investing in our communities, like sidewalks and our education systems, building our playgrounds for the actual people in the community? We're gentrifying these neighborhoods. We're kicking these people out. We're getting them to buy their homes after the tornado. We're not actually benefiting the community. We're taking from our people. So how is this plan actually going to benefit the people of Nashville? Because we've been suffering, and even back since the flood. So I'm just trying to figure out, in what way does investing in the public safety help our people when we're being killed? And I was actually a 911 dispatcher, and what you're saying is not actually factual about 911 dispatchers. There's a lot of money for 911 dispatchers. There's a lot of money for public safety, and there is surplus of it that can be used for the community. And it's like you're choosing, you guys as a choice are not investing in the community, and you're sitting on all this money and you can invest in the community. So why are you not?
Is that your question? Okay. Well, I disagree with you. We are woefully short in our police, our fire, and our first responders. We've had almost a 31% increase in homicides over the last 12 months in Davidson County. Do we need to invest in the communities? Absolutely. Do we need to invest in the sidewalks? Well, they've already built that in there. I'm saying if we have a surplus, if we're not going to cut the tax rate down, then we need to actually spend the money in an area that I believe will be beneficial. Now, I'm not picking sides here. I'm saying we've got issues in Nashville that we have to deal with. And whether we like it from one side or the other, it's a real issue, and we have to deal with that.
All right, we have another question. Mike, you're now on. What is your question for Steve Glover tonight?
Yeah, good evening to you, ma'am. And to you, Councilman Glover. Pretty much everybody who's been moving here have learned very quickly that Nashville has all the glam and glitter now. We even have, a W Hotel that's opening up here. Who would have ever thought it? But basically that you guys would take any big company's money on the backside and you make poor artists who are starving, music artists, people in the service industry, housekeepers, bartenders, on, and you're putting it on the backs of them. The timing, I had a friend, he said, there's nothing wrong with Nashville having a tax increase. They need that tax increase. But he said, you just don't go and up and go with a 34% tax increase right after a tornado and right straight into COVID, where people couldn't even start building up their new businesses because COVID just came in and closed down basically the whole world. Glover, you talk a big talk, but I know people who personally know you, and they say you're full of it. And you could have done more, but you always want to come out like you're Superman, defending the everyday man, and that is just not the case. And most people I've talked to that are moving here agree also. You guys have a nice night. Thank you.
You too.
Well, I appreciate your opinion. I enjoy hearing everyone's opinion. I will say this. I don't know anyone who has fought as diligently on the floor to try and back down the tax rate as I have. And while, we'll get a couple phone calls on this, no doubt about it, where people will be critical, that doesn't bother me because I know that we've not done necessarily the right thing. And yes, I don't think I don't think I'm Superman, but I know I represent a large percentage of the people of Nashville. And I know every day I can lay my head down and go to sleep at night because the tax rate was extremely too high and I won't back down. And so, if people want to say bad things about me, that's been happening for years. That doesn't bother me. So, I'm going to do what I believe is the right thing for the city as a whole. I'm going to do what I believe the people voted for me for says I should be doing because I talk to them all the time. So, if you want to criticize me, that's okay. That doesn't bother me. I say we sit down and talk about it and figure it out, and let's work collectively in order to take care of Nashville.
All right, Steve, you're pretty popular tonight. We have Ann on line one, and you are...
Yes. In general, you just said, let's sit down and speak about it. There should be some way for the public to voice their concerns and in a public forum. And Metro Council should be offering that to the citizens of Davidson County. And we were offered that last year, and I believe by law we're supposed to be offered it again this year. But when we have approached, or I have, and I know other people have, we have been given a deaf ear. As a matter of fact, I know of one person who tried to have a news conference last week, and the plugs were turned off so that the media that was there for the news conference couldn't plug in their microphones and their lights. So what is the council doing so that the citizens of Davidson County has their opportunity for public comments this year?
Well, one of the things that aggravated me so much last year, I wish I could give you a direct answer, but I don't have the direct answer. One of the things that aggravated me so much last year was the fact that throughout the public, quote, hearing on the budget, the lines kept getting jammed. They were using the COVID to where we couldn't be there. The people who were there, but literally folks were having to stay up all night long. And finally, folks just gave up. And so many people that were anti the tax increase gave up, yet everybody else on the council floor said, we heard from everyone. No, we did not hear from everyone. And that's one reason I keep beating the drum the way I beat it. Because, I mean, if you're happy with a 34% property tax increase, okay, have at it. I just don't talk to many people who are happy with that. And so I'll keep fighting to try and lower that tax rate. If they're not going to lower that tax rate, I'm going to fight to try and get public safety lifted up. Again, let me emphasize, in the fire department, we've got one station more than we had about 20 years ago. We're woefully understaffed there. And in the building community, there has to be a streamlining of sorts, of which I'm working with the mayor's office on that one. And I hope we get together and we can come up with some good solutions in order to try and keep Nashville moving forward. But we've got to give the people of Nashville their money back if we have the surplus I'm anticipating us having right now.
All right, Andy, thank you so much for patiently waiting. You're now up if you would like to ask a question.
Sorry?
Andy, do you hear us okay?
Yes.
You're up now if
I'm
you would
here.
like to ask a question.
Hey, okay, yes, I would like to ask a question of Councilman Cooper, but first of all, I'd like to address the gentleman that called in earlier that was saying that Mr. Glover is full of beans. If you want to point a finger at a councilman, I happen to attend the meetings, and Mr. Bob Mendez, I don't see him out there fighting for the taxpayers. In fact, I'm quite certain that he was instrumental in putting the tax increase on people. And Councilman Glover is the only council person that's out here saying we have a surplus of tax funds that we're not using. Now, on top of that, I know for a fact that our police officers are running with 17 plus calls waiting from the time they clock in to the time they clock out. They can barely get their jobs done. We have a severe shortage. And on that, what good do sidewalks and parks and things like that do if we don't have them protected, if our children aren't protected? Now,
Oh, sorry, I thought she was done. Do you want to answer her question before we go to break?
Well, the only thing I'm going to say is, she's right. It's very rare you see anybody on the council fighting for folks to get their money back. I won't back down. And even when people criticize me, that's okay. That doesn't bother me. If I think I'm doing the right thing, I'm not backing down. I'm going to do what I believe I should be doing. I'm going to do what I told the people who voted for me that I would do, and that is protect their wallet and to watch out for the city. And if that makes some people mad, I'm okay with that, because that's just the way it works in politics.
If you guys have any additional questions regarding the property tax hike and funding police and firefighters in the Nashville area, please call. We'll get to you as soon as we can after this break.